All right, let's talk about this state senator from Arizona sponsoring a bill to research Trump derangement syndrome. You're going to love this. Okay. This is from azfamily.com. A GOP state senator has filed a bill ordering Arizona to study what the legislation calls Trump derangement syndrome. State Senator Janae Shamp, a Republican from Surprise, filed Senate Bill 1070, which would require the Arizona Department of Health Services to conduct a study on Trump derangement syndrome, also known as TDS. The phrase is used by Republicans to dismiss Democrats who criticize President Donald Trump and has no official standing as a mental health disorder. The bill would give the health department 1 year to produce a report on the origins of TDS, along with its long-term effects on individuals, communities, and public discourse. Will Humble, former director of the Arizona Department of Health Services, called the proposal silly. Quote, "You're ordering a state agency to do a bunch of work that has no objective, no meaningful outcome. And by the way, it's outside their mission. They're not social scientists," unquote, Humble said. Humble predicted the bill would consume time and resources before ultimately receiving a gubernatorial veto. He said the legislation has no objective other than making a political statement. Okay. I want to make sure that you got plenty to weigh in here, but I want to set you up if I can, Q. People that are critical of Donald Trump, people that are passionate in their criticism of Donald Trump, are justified, just like anyone's justified in being critical of the government, of the president, of any elected official. Republicans have adopted this idea of Trump derangement syndrome to label anyone who is critical of the president and consistent in their criticisms of him as somehow having a mental health disorder. Okay, that's the Cliff's Notes. What it does is it reframes the conversation. Instead of having to listen to a person and take inventory of their criticisms of Donald Trump, of the GOP, of the MAGA movement, whatever, they can now dismiss people as being crazy. And there's at least half of the country that doesn't buy it. But it certainly works for the MAGAverse, right? Oh, this person has TDS, they have Trump derangement syndrome. Don't listen to what they have to say, okay? So this is how this is used. And they've gotten very good at this. Invent something or rewrite the definition of something or, whatever, right? And then weaponize the language and then use it as either a shield or a sword. A shield to cover your hollow policies and beliefs, or as a sword to attack those who are in pursuit of a more equitable country for all of us. Now, I want to turn this on its head before I let you have a shot at this, Q. Trump derangement syndrome, as we know, is something that they just made up. Their strategy from Trump on the way down is just make up something, and then if you say it enough times, it'll become real. It'll exist in the cultural zeitgeist, even if it doesn't exist in science, even if it doesn't exist in textbooks, even if it doesn't exist indeed in the real world. It'll exist in the culture. It'll be a buzzword, right? But if I flip Trump derangement syndrome on its head, I could point at this very state senator and say, you know what? These are the actions of a person in a cult. And I famously said in the past, I don't like to call the MAGA movement a cult. And that's not what I said. I said these are the actions of a person who is in a cult. Okay. But I don't like to call it the MAGA movement a cult because, and I just never circled back to it, but I remember coming across some information that explained what a cult was. And I think that the MAGA movement only fit like 4 of the 5 check 4 of the 5 boxes of a cult. So without that 5th one, as a journalist, I couldn't call it a cult. But Q has made some inroads, as far as I'm concerned, with convincing me that, you know what, there might be more than one way to define cult. There might be more than one way to define mass manipulation. There might be more than one way to define collective hallucinations and the Mandela effect and whatever, right? And I'm not saying I'm qualified to do that, but if these people can make up something out of the thin blue sky, then I certainly can go back and re-examine everything that I've read. Indeed, this story itself. And if I were to compare it to the actions of a person in a cult, it would be virtually indistinguishable. Now, I was talking about Elon Musk earlier, and I said if it walks like a duck and it talks like a duck and it quacks like a duck, it's a duck, right? So, Q, I will say to you that I appreciate you allowing me to expand my view of the MAGA movement. Now, of course, I won't say anything with any authority here, but it feels very cultish. So your thoughts here.
Once upon a time, stories like this, conversations like this would be left to the margins of conspiracy theorists, laughed at by some, dismissed by others. But when the most powerful man in the free world is responsible for these types of thoughts and has tens of millions of people that blindly follow him, you can no longer dismiss it. You can no longer laugh at it. You can no longer treat it like it's not serious. It shouldn't be, but it very much is. When the people who get to determine what goes in our textbooks, what our children are allowed to learn and what we're allowed to say, start thinking and talking like this, it becomes very, very dangerous. And it is not just something that exists in the cultural zeitgeist. They can make it fact. And you might think that sounds a bit dramatic, but billions of people worship as Christians based on the teachings of the King James Bible. The King James Bible is a very young text in relation to Christianity.
Bible, yeah.
In relation to the original text. Mm-hmm. The fact that there's a King James version means that King James
commissioned it.
Commissioned a different version of the Bible that people worship God by as almost literal. Because the person who was in charge of telling people what was true came up with a different version. And people have worshiped God according to that for centuries. So do we get to shrug something off as unreal when this man says it, he gets real career politicians to commission studies? Like, how do you find subjects to study for this? Oh, you also get to determine who you think has symptoms of this made up syndrome. Like, this can get very dystopian, very dark, really fast.
Sure. Yeah.
So it's another uncomfortable conversation that we have to have about this very uncomfortable moment in history that friends, neighbors, and countrymen helped usher in. And some are still too intentionally obtuse to admit that they were duped and that they were wrong and that these people are dangerous.